So now it's my great pleasure to introduce our speaker this evening. Yvonne Mullock is a graduate of the Glasgow School of Art and is currently based in Calgary, Canada. Over the past 17 years, she has participated in artist-run residence programs within Scotland, England, Canada, the United States, and has shown in group and solo exhibitions across Canada and internationally. It's great to have her here because Yvonne is just finished installing a piece at Manning Hall. So this is terrific, and it opens. It's open from today, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
I think. I didn't see it open now. So
it's open now, so you can see it anytime. And but the official opening will be on November 8th, which coincides with the opening of Rebellious. So please mark your calendars and make it out to that. Yvonne has had a very active career and has exhibited extensively, including another exhibition will open up this Saturday, Extraordinary Objects at the Glenbow, Calgary's Art Museum, curated by Sarah Todd. She's also taken part in the Alberta Foundation for the Arts International Studio Curatorial Program in New York.
It's a mouthful.
It is a mouthful. She's shown an exhibition, Great Auk Sanctuary, at the Museum of Flat Earth, curated by Kay Burns, Fogo Island. Hit and Missed at the Esker Foundation Contemporary Art in Calgary, Home Economics at the Textile Museum of Canada, Toronto, Ontario, and the Alberta Biennale Future Station, Alberta Gallery of Art in 2015. Mullock is represented by the Jarvis Hall Gallery in Calgary. So please help me in welcome.
Thank you, Sean, and thank you, Gillian, as well, for having me here to talk today. I also wanted to say thanks to the AGA for bringing me here, and for Lindsay Sharman, who's been curating my project that's opening at the Manning Hall Gallery. I thought I'd start off with this image, which has got really nothing to do with my art practice at all, but that I recently found myself on Google Earth, and I kind of thought this was like so amazing. I wanted to share this image with you, and it kind of got me thinking that I wondered whether I might simultaneously be in several cities at the same time. So I kind of went on this mad search of like finding myself in Calgary and other cities that I've like visited in, and this kind of idea of having like a digital kind of like fingerprint of myself existing. And anyway, it's going to be an ongoing search. I'm going to continue to do it, and I recommend you do it as well. And so on this talk, I'm just going to take you on a little journey through several projects. And I'm going to first start off talking about the Manning Hall piece that I've just finished installing today. So before that, I was going to just talk a little bit about how I mine skills. When I finished art school, I started working at the theatre at the end of the street in Glasgow, working for Scottish Opera. And it occurred to me that, you know, I needed to work to pay the rent. I might as well do a job that I could sort of steal skills and covertly kind of like maybe acquire the skills of other people and maybe steal them as well for like future projects. So this is something that I've been doing since like 2001. I kind of went into working at Scottish Opera having absolutely no sewing skills whatsoever, but everything that I'd learned myself. So all of the kind of watching people and allowing, you know, to just be a student and acquiring all of these amazing sewing skills has been really fruitful for projects that I've done. Mainly because it's also good to see how like large creative projects come together. Because since moving to Canada, I've been working in film, so that's also kind of cool to see how different departments work. And really with the idea that maybe I could one day pull off a giant project like a film potentially. I also really enjoy people. and I often work with the background performers who are quite an interesting group of people that come in. So each show is different as well. They can be of different eras. So this image is from a TV show, which I'm brain farting on the name of at the minute. But it was set in the 1870s, so that was really cool to see the kind of authentic dress from that era. Damnation, that was it. It was on Netflix. It's very good, but they only did one season. Then working in film as well, I've had the opportunity to work in the breakdown department in costumes. So that's where you get to age clothes to make them look old. And what's interesting about that is that you use different techniques of like sanding and grating textiles, and then you get to paint them with fabric paints. And quite often you have to make multiples of the same thing. So that's a really interesting process to do exactly the same thing over and over again. And I never thought I would utilise my painting skills that I acquired in Glasgow, but there I did. Anyway, so I love how costumes transform people and how it transports them into different characters. And yeah, I'm kind of really in love with that whole process. So the project I've called Gift Love at the Manning Hall was really this kind of cool segue to kind of bring my interests of costume, which I've had for years, and to kind of bring it to this project and see where that might go. If you've never been to the Manning Hall space, it's a really interesting space because it's kind of a bit like a waiting room of like people maybe waiting for someone to meet them at the gallery, or maybe someone's gone to the toilet, so someone else is waiting for them, and it kind of has this bizarre captive audience. And the space is also hired out for events, corporate things, weddings. So I was kind of thinking of having this waiting space and having like a captive audience really sparked my interest. So basically the piece is a giant pair of velvet gloves. They're 12 foot long and about 4.5 feet wide, and they're modelled off my own hands. And I was really curious to make these gloves as kind of like a talismanic tool of how I might connect with people without me being there, because it kind of it references my body without my body being there. But also I'm kind of interested in the idea of the space inside the glove, but also that the hand is this tool to touch people and to connect with people. And gloves also have this fascinating history, and all of that is kind of symbolised in this incredible accessory. So when I'm doing a project, I do a lot of research. So when I was thinking about making these gloves, I was, looking back in history and to kind of learn more about them. And it turns out that gloves were actually used by like cavemen sometime between the Upper Paleolithic and Neolithic times. And this image comes from a bear tooth that was found in a cave in France somewhere, and they had inscribed this image of a long glove. So the theory is that these like people, maybe they were naked, I don't know, but they were wearing these like really long gloves to maybe like do what people did back then, like hunting. It probably would have protected them from like a cold and other kind of caveman activities. Along with that other research, gloves have been an important part of our human customs. They denote status. They're also have been used in ceremonies, from like Masonic ceremonies to also courts of law. When presenting, there's this custom where you would present judges with white gloves if there was no prisoners to jail or hang. And obviously that custom is now no longer practiced, but I thought that was really interesting. Gloves were also seen as symbols and pledges of security. For instance, a glove on a spear would have been a sign and pledge of faith, and they were also given as tokens of faith between lovers. So there's a rich custom of us wearing gloves. Also, wearing gloves at funerals, that was a thing. But not only that, giving gloves at funerals, which is kind of cool, that would have been adopted like sometime in the 17th century. And I was reading this account of the custom of wearing white gloves at the funeral of virgin maidens, and that would have represented innocence. And there's also accounts of them actually just cutting out glove hand shapes and kind of having that kind of for the funeral procession. So I like the fact that they're like these mute messengers of congratulation or consolidation. When I was kind of delving into this research, I also kind of looked at how the term glove came to be. And there's this book that's referenced called The Guide to Tongues, written in 1617, where there's one theory that the word came from gift, love, which was that custom of exchanging gloves, either as, between lovers or just pledges of affection between people that you might love. And I just thought that was just so beautiful. And that's where I got the term for the title for the work. Gloves in art is also a popular thing, so I'm just going to cite some influences of when I was researching the project. Merritt Oppenheim, who is an artist I love, she also had a day job designing gloves with Elsa Schiaparelli, who I'm going to talk about in a minute, who was this designer who was working in the 1930s and 40s. But Oppenheim came back to working with gloves as a symbol of the hands and tools of the artist, and it continued to feature in her work time again and again. This is like one of my favourite glove works that she did, which was for a magazine called Parquet, and that they would do these special editions that would feature an artist's work. So this was an edition of 150 goat skin gloves, silk screened with the veins on the top, with hand embroidery on it. I would love to own this piece of work. Elsa Schiaparelli, who's this Italian fashion designer. At her height, she was kind of like a rival of Coco Chanel, and she was a prominent figure in fashion in New York and Paris between the two world wars. I have a real crush on her because she had no training and her approach was really spontaneous, and she would drape fabric directly onto the body. So her fashion pieces were like super wearable, comfortable. At the time, she also hung out with surrealists Man Ray and Marcel Duchamp, and they were all mixed up in each other's soup. She also, interesting enough, she pioneered the wrap dress, which Diane Furstenberg might be more famous for, but it was actually Elsa Schiaparelli that invented it. She also invented swimsuits with inbuilt bras, and also she designed culottes for a famous tennis player at the time, and it was super controversial. And she also designed the outfits for Amelia What's-Her-Noodles, the lady that circumnavigated the Earhart, yeah. So she designed her outfits too. And she also used really unconventional materials like zippers and acetate, and used pleats in her work. And she collaborated with artists at the time, Merritt Oppenheim, Jean Cocteau and Dali. And she was really fond of employing that trompe-l'oeil techniques to give lifelike illusions to a design. So these gloves were really really inspiring when I looked at that. She also designed knitwear that had effects that looked like it was a bow, but it was just integrated into the design. And she also did this really awesome dress that she designed with Dali that had like torn flesh on it, but it was like silk. It was glorious. Likea Clark as well is an artist that I'm really into at the minute, a Brazilian artist, and a lot of her work, she discovers ways for museum goers or participants to interact with her works. And she also did a lot of work with psychiatric patients as well, and that kind of really informed her work. In 1964, she did a series that completely abandoned objects. She wanted to move away from that and create art that was more rooted in the senses, works that relied on the participants' individual experiences occurring directly in their body. And yeah, I just think this piece is really interesting. So she had like different gloves with different objects that you could like touch, and I just think that's like so interesting for that work to be done at that time. It just seems like really contemporary. Some glove designs for you. So I kind of went through and just printed off all the glove designs when thinking about, okay, I know I want to make a glove, but what should it look like? And there's so many subtle differences in how to actually make a glove, in ways that the way the thumb is set, when you're making gloves to do like for workwear, they're made in a completely different way to like an evening glove. And there's also like different patterns for gloves that you can make yourself. The velvet pair I think might also be an Elsa Schiaparelli one, and the one with the fingernails on it as well, which is really cool. And then I love the embroidered element embellished on the blue kid skin gloves, and the amazing ones in the middle with those incredible printed designs on them. Enlarging a glove pattern to that 12-foot scale is pretty difficult, I would say, but you know, I like a challenge. And obviously when you're making something from a hand scale to a ginormous scale, there's also other interesting things to consider, such as like the drape of the fabric, because obviously that's going to be really heavy, and how that might accommodate, how that might affect the design and how it will hang. So we had to like introduce new elements to the design to kind of incorporate that. Also the fingernails, they were leather, and rather than stick them onto the glove, I worked with an amazing pattern cutter and stitcher called Kathleen Gasker that I know from my film and television world, who's incredibly talented. We figured out a way to embed the nails inside the glove so it looks really lifelike. The fabric, there's 30 meters of velvet that's been custom dyed to my hand, to my skin tone. And again, I stole a person who I encountered, a wonderful artist who's a dye artist and natural dye expert called Caroline Ford, and she dyed all of that yardage, which was awesome to work with those experts. Is a little close-up of the fingernails. So it's a type of lamb leather which is divinely soft, and there's the 3 shades of pink which denote the fingertip, the nail tip, the cuticle and the nail bed. Other things to kind of make it lifelike, we incorporated wrinkles into the knuckles and cuts in the fabric. We used like different darting techniques, different pattern techniques to kind of get that in, and then just straight stitching on top of the velvet as well to kind of give it this amazing look. Lindsay actually suggested that I should get my palm red from the large glove to see if maybe a palm reader might be able to, if I might get the same reading. I actually don't have an image of the back of the palm side of the hand, but you'll see it in the exhibition where we've tried as much as we can to mimic the lines of my palm through different cutting methods and putting it back together again like you would do with like a wedding dress. So I'm seeing this work as like emblematic of my love for those people that I have loved, still love, and yet to love. So recently, I like to go back and revisit ideas a lot that I might have had in my practice years before, and then they'll pop up again, and then I'll kind of sit with them and see where the potential of that might go. I'm also really interested in materials that mimic other materials, especially textiles. So the sculptor Antonio Corradini, I hope I'm saying that right, is the master of replicating this in marble, and the lightness of the drape is like phenomenal, especially with the image on the right of the figure where you can tell that it is just a veil on her face. It's absolutely amazing. What also kind of blows my mind about that is the years that it would have taken to acquire those skills. Kind of blows my mind, especially when you consider that marble is just so unforgiving, and that hours it would have taken to have done that. I don't know, it's kind of amazing. This work by Wendell Castle called Ghost Clock, again has this textile-like lightness to it. This is actually carved from a single block of mahogany. It was made in 1985 and is at the Smithsonian. And then on the right is A.K. Burns, who's a phenomenal artist based in Brooklyn at the minute. These pieces are wall hangings of work shirts worn working while she was in the foundry. And she had this lovely little thing about the work that I'll read out to you. As indexes haunted by absence, they mark the economic and cultural shift away from industrial labour towards immaterial and affective labour. And I just thought that was really, really beautiful. So I've been building upon my interest in craft practices and methodologies, and this kind of new line of work that I've been exploring kind of, I think, reveals the destructive action of the given process. So this is porcelain. So what I've done is I've got my panties, and I've dipped the panties into porcelain slip, and then it's this very tentative thing that happens next, where you have to dry the item in its kind of, however you might place it in its gesture, very, very slowly, so that the textile doesn't dry faster than the ceramic, to then maybe it might work out, and then you put it in the kiln, and then you pray to whoever that it might work out. And sometimes it works, and sometimes it doesn't. But I really like this idea of that the outcome of the work serves as a record of that like transition from textile to ceramic, where vitrification happens and it turns into that glass-like state. There's something really magical about that. But I kind of see these works that they are kind of like a snapshot in time, that they capture that transition. I was also interested in the kind of quiet ceremony each night where I take my clothes off, and that this is like such a personal routine that is so insignificant, it's so unspectacular, and it's so inconsequential doing this. And then when I come to like observe these, I guess quite boring things, I'm quite enamoured with how it, you know, it has my body shape in it, and you can tell that I've worn it from the subtle gestures of how over time I've gently put holes in things, or where the fabrics become thinner. So I kind of see these as self-portraits, although that might sound a bit cheesy, but that's how I'm looking at it. So this work has been using all of my personal clothing and transforming them into the porcelain medium. And it's a one-of-a-kind deal, so they're not cast. So it's a one-time act of doing it. And here's a few more. I actually forget. The titles of them, I've given them a few. There's like Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Then there's ones, my favourites, the big comfy ones. 2 for 1 in the sale, this one and that one. That's all put together on the plinth. This is the work, but shown in a slightly different way, that's going to be shown at the group show in the Glenbow that's opening on Saturday. And I've also done socks. Just realised that. Oh, I don't want to do that. Okay, I'll just pretend it's not. This is the next batch that I've done. The more I do it, the more kind of you become accustomed to like the subtle ways of how the slip sits in the material, and also figuring out what brand of panties work better. So that has been a real experiment. Donna Karan, New York, seems to be really good. Calvin Klein as well, because they also print the Calvin Klein symbol using, it's white often on the underwear, and that has a bit of iron oxide on it. So when you fire it, you can actually see the text, but I've yet to get a pair that haven't cracked horribly. And then this was a bra, which has taken so many attempts to do, but this one made it. So I'm going to try and do some more in the future, piling clothing up, so it's more like a stack, neatly folded. And I also want to do another one where it's just like a pile of clothes, which is, in reality, that's what it looks like on my bedroom floor. So this project, Darkhorse, was a solo exhibition at Art Gallery in 2016. And this work really came about when I moved here in 2011. Yeah, I knew cowboys were like here, but I kind of just wanted to understand it a bit more, to kind of understand the stereotype versus the reality of like cowboyness, and explore that culture. What does it mean to be a cowboy? And how is it incorporated in Western identity? So with that, I took myself off to Cowboy Stampede. I understand that some people love it, some people hate it. There is something quite interesting going to a place with fresh eyes and a perspective, having a fresh perspective on things. So the image on the top left is from the parade, and this guy rode that bull down the street. Then the miniature ponies, so that's its whole segment. I didn't realise that the Stampede it showcased different types of agriculture, and miniature ponies is one of them, so that was cool. Bottom left, general debauchery and hedonism, this man drinking beer from his boot. And then on the right bottom, the more kind of traditional agricultural show, which is what we have in the UK too. I'm actually a farmer's daughter from a long line of farmers. We've been farmers forever. I'm actually the first generation to not be a farmer. So I've been to lots of agriculture shows. So this is like very familiar to me, where you go and there's like a petting thing, and it's you might also see different exhibits that might be kind of educational or try and sell you things. So the city's corporate symbol is a Stetson hat. Probably, one of the most iconic Western garments you can get. I'm really interested in the Stetson hat being a symbol of the West because it's so intrinsically entwined with that identity. And it's also an accessory. I have a thing about accessories. But also how that identity has been reinforced through Western films, which is really incredible. So this image depicts the different folds, and actually the different folds in Stetson hats have different functions. So for instance, the different functions might be where it can be easily grabbed, like the cattleman. That fold is there so it can be grabbed and pulled down against the wind. And there's other ones there that have their functionality is to keep the head cool on really hot days. I also love the names of them as well, like the Boss of the Plains. That was actually the first type of hat that was made before they introduced the creases. So it was just this super, no creases at all. So the white Stetson hat, which is a trademark of Smithville Hats in Calgary, incredible hat maker, really small operation. I think there's only 5 employees there. So the white Stetson hat is very much a part of the symbol of Calgary, and is given to notaries, celebrities, politicians, people coming through the city. They'll be given this white hat that is made in Calgary. So you have the Fonz with his white hat. You've got Kate and William, Dave Lee Roth, George W., Ozzy and Sharon, and the Dialogues, so that it's not discriminatory of your celebrity status. So the Smithville Hats have been going since 1904, and they use the same techniques and methodology and actually the same machinery, which is kind of mind-blowing. They're highly crafted objects. So I stalked Smithville for a while, bribed them with donuts to let me watch how they make these incredible hats. So on the left is an example of a hat from their old stock from the 1970s, this beautiful baby blue hat, and you probably can't tell from that image, but it has a huge crown. So in the 70s, having a massive crown was really popular then. And then on the right is a finishing technique that they do. They actually do set it alight to burn off all the residual fur that might be kind of floating around. They just singe it off and it goes away. And they do wear hats while they work. This wasn't put on for me. And also that calendar in the background, I've never really noticed before, but that's quite So the machinery is nearly 120 years old. So steam is used to manipulate the felted fur or wool, and the fur could be beaver or rabbit or a combination of the two. So basically the hats are formed into this basic shape, and then each one is hand finished with the folds and the trims. So Darkhorse is like a accumulation of those interests of Western tropes, and I was really interested how the reduction of this Western identity is fundamentally in this hat, but also with the horse as well. And so this project is comprised of performance, film, sculpture and printmaking. The work circles back to that interest of revealing the destructive action of the process, often where the process is hidden. The work reveals these processes and it becomes part of the work. So with the printmaking, I wanted to show the action of how a print could be made from a Stetson hat. And I actually came up with the seed of this idea when I was at the Banff Centre using their paper-making hydraulic press. And I took a bunch of the old Smithville hats from like the 70s with me and inked them up with the ink and sandwiched them in between the paper and put them in the hydraulic press. And I just got these really interesting prints from them. But I wanted to kind of like show that action more, and then I thought about introducing the horse, and then if I could replace the horse with the hydraulic press, what would that mechanism look like? How could I engineer it? So again, I stole people who had the skills, who could like build this thing. One is this phenomenal maker of things called Anne Thrale, who's she actually is the preparator at the IKG gallery, phenomenal. And her dad is actually an engineer, and she definitely has problem-solving things that are very engineering-like. And we came up with this design, consulted with my friend and artist Carly Mortimer, who's actually pictured on the left, who is a horse rider. And there's lots of psychology when you're trying to get a horse onto a thing. You have to account and make it a certain width, otherwise they won't get on. So you kind of have to trick the horse. So we're thinking, how can we trick this horse to get on this thing? Will it work? I don't really know. So I'm just going to play the film. It's just a 2-minute clip, and I hope it works. Just imagine it's not jumpy. That poor horse. Okay. So the exhibition, I showed the printmaking machine, and the film was screened downstairs. And then I also showed the hat prints on the other side of the gallery. And what's really incredible is that the hat prints actually end up not looking like hats at all, and kind of end up, I think, they look really vaginal. They look like vaginas. Like the folds in the crown look like labia. But that's kind of interesting because it's also like, in a way, subverting that kind of male-dominated identity, and so I think that's interesting too. Also with the exhibition, I did a poster, a takeaway poster, and I did some research at the Glenbow, actually online. They have, you can access all of their images online, and then you can request to have them, and then you can print them. So I made these collages of the Stampede Queens that Smithville also have the role of making the hat for the Stampede Queen every year. And I actually know that lady in the middle, and I'll talk about that in a minute. So next piece I'm going to talk about really quickly, I can't believe how time's flying, I'm going to race through this. Hit and Miss, which was a project in 2015 made at Esker Foundation, where I collaborated with the Chinook Guild of Fibre Arts. It was really an endurance performance is the word I would use. It was made for the gallery's project space, which is on the ground floor of the gallery. And again, I really like spaces that are odd, because it has all of this passing human traffic. It's kind of like a goldfish bowl, and people walk past it, they might not even know the gallery's up on the 4th floor, but again has this brilliant captive audience. So my idea was to animate the space for 8 weeks and hook a rug from beginning to end, so that the activity of its production was the work. So we fabricated a gigantic rug for the gallery's front door on the 4th floor. In case you don't know about hooked rugs, and they have a beautiful long history in North America. It's a craft that was brought over from Europe as a way to make floor coverings from a range of textiles such as old clothing, tea towels, tablecloths. They'd be ripped up into strips and hooked through a burlap. So at the time, the fashion was to stamp rugs with a design. So it was kind of a bit like painting by numbers. But often these examples are from Fogo Island and Newfoundland, where people would adapt the pattern to suit their own idea that they had, or to maybe suit what materials they might have left over. They might not have had enough to have like flowers all over the piece, so then they just adapt it. This striped pattern here is called Hit and Miss, which is where the title of that work comes from, which is this idea: you put your hand in the scrap bag and you just pull out whatever, and then you hook it in, so it means random, but also has that other meaning of like to either be a success or not, which I guess also perfectly describes the collaborative relationship. You know, we went into making this thing not knowing it would even work, or if we'd even finish or anything. So I thought that was really nice to kind of go in with an unknown. Pretty scary, but it was interesting to do that. So rug hooking is still practiced today. So this is the Chinook Guild of Fibre Arts. They meet once a week. And rug hooking's kind of changed somewhat a little bit. The materials are now more high quality. They still have charm, but it kind of lacks a little bit of that variance that you might get in the different random textures offered by the different materials you might use. So they meet once a week to share skills, resources and ideas. And often they work on their own pieces, when I was thinking about what the project would be, I started to think about their individual labour and how much time it takes to make one piece. I started to think, what if we combined that labour into one thing? What would that look like? What if we made the process public? What if we championed that labour and showed every step, revealing the entire fabrication from beginning to end? What if this was the work? So, that's what we decided to do, make a rug for the front door. So we decided to put a call out to the general public in around the area of where the gallery was to come and donate their clothes. That would be the materials that we would make the rug from. And that the rug would, from using those materials of people's personal clothing, that it would form like a community portrait. So the clothing that was donated was prepared and cut into what they call noodles, big long strips, and hooked into the burlap. And then the project for 8 weeks was open to the public so they could come in, have a go at rug hooking, have a chat with us. And so the members, it was like a rotating group of members, I think 30 members that we had that would come in on a rotational thing. Some different images of the rug in its fabrication. View from outside, so it is like a goldfish bowl. And then we finished the rug, and I calculated it took 325 collective hours to make, 8 weeks to fabricate. And we had a rug laying ceremony where we paraded the rug around the building, took it up to the 4th floor where it remained for the exhibition for people to actually use as a rug and walk upon, that it would serve audiences coming into the gallery. And that was really important, that it wasn't put on a wall but used, and that over time, as the rug degrades, that would be a marking of its use that would become part of the work. This is a rogue image that somehow got into my presentation. These are quilts that people have made on Fogo Island. I really love, briefly I'll just talk about them, that they're like really bold, very geometric. Some of the quilts look like rugs. The one in the middle is a lady called Mary Frances Decker who makes these amazing hooked rugs, and her quilts always look like rugs to me. Utilising materials that are available. Often the designs are like been skewed from other designs, borrowed by determining how much fabric is left over. Really awesome. Anyway, this is another public project that I did for the Esker Gallery in Calgary, and this was to make a floor blanket for their Bring the Baby tours that we have once a month, where people can bring their baby, let it roll, run around, crawl around on the gallery floor, and they realised that they didn't have anywhere for the babies to kind of convene or meet, so that they commissioned me to come up with something. I was really interested in the idea of making a work for a baby, because they're drawn to things that stimulate the senses. They're like a captive audience, so if they hate it, they can't really leave anyway. But they're also amazing critics. If they don't like it, they'll just, drop it and move on to the next thing. So I thought I would show actually the proposal, just because I thought that might be interesting to share, just kind of like how I present things. So I did a mood board of different artists I was looking at. I always like to kind of look at what other people are making and kind of introduce that into the work. So we've got Yayoi Kusama with her soft sculptures, a whole room of them. Katie Stout, which is the pink thing that person's coming out of. That was a series of interactive furniture she did for design. conference. Tamara Henderson, her work's really cool. She could have made that furniture-esque staircase there. A lot of her work she will think of through dreams. Really interesting artist if you've not heard of her. Cosmo von Bonin at the bottom with a stuffed octopus. Then there's this thing called a boppy cushion, which is what everybody's using right now for babies to encourage them to not be on their back all the time, but to start being on their stomachs. And then Nicola L, her soft foot sculpture, which is kind of like a big lounging seat, larger than scale. It's the same scale as a person. It's very big. So I kind of went through and I gave them 3 designs of different types of quilts that could be like a nice poofy texture to sit on that will have different visual arresting things in there. So the boppy cushion has been transformed into a donut cushion that's black and white because babies love black and white. And I kind of saw it as like this movable thing that could be a point of interest so that the babies could crawl together and maybe look at one another when they get to the middle. This one, I was kind of thinking about how to corral the wandering babies. So this is like leg thickness stuffed cushion with tufted elements where you just use wool to tie all of the quilted bits together. And also babies really like tufted wool because they like to fiddle with it with their fingers, and it has a calming effect apparently. And then this one was a circle of pie kind of design with a back prop that looked like a mouth with a tongue. So I ended up making a hybrid of all 3 in the end. So it was a circle of pie, tufted, with a donut cushion in the middle, and I used the puffy leg thing to keep them in, but I massively miscalculated how long it needed to be. So there ended up being a gap between the feet, so it kind of looked like they were walking back into the womb again, which was like the most happy, amazing accident I think I've ever done. That is actually the end of my talk, and I was going to have some kind of like poetic thing that is going to tie all of these projects together, but I don't have it yet. So if you can think of something, tell me. And then maybe if you have a question, you could ask me a question. That would be nice.